Illness and Cure, Chapter 6, Clinical Epistemology. What is epistemology? Science tries to make the unuseful practical and the uncanny comprehensive. Epistemology is the science that aims to criticize and evaluate methods of attaining knowledge and reaching the truth. This implies methodical self-criticism, what the German calls Erkenntnistheorie, and in this country is sometimes called Gnoseology. This implies the methodical self-criticism. Science tries to make the unuseful practical and uncanny comprehensive. Epistemology is the science that aims to criticize and evaluate methods of attaining knowledge and reaching the truth. This implies methodical self-criticism. Science tries to make the unuseful practical and the uncanny comprehensible. Epistemology is the science that aims to criticize and evaluate the methods of attaining knowledge and reaching the truth. This implies methodical self-criticism, what the Germans call, and this country is sometimes called, Gnoseology, investigates the theory and methodology of knowledge and bad and good habits of arriving at explanations. Philosophy was long prone to view men for mere rational beings since it studied varieties of distorted thinking and observes the ways in which primitive and ancient modes of thought continually and outwittingly invades the man's logic. Yet, psychiatry cannot contribute valuable insights to the theory of knowledge unless it becomes more aware of the instruments of thinking in itself. Contrasting theories bombard the psychiatric mind, among which it is impossible to choose critically without the awareness of psychiatric epistemology. Philosophy was long prone to view men as rational beings thinking in logical ways. Psychiatry believes that a rational man does not know much rationality about himself. Yet, one of the tenets of psychiatry is that disease can be mastered by mere understanding. Epistemology, the science of presumptions, cannot exist with the unchecked presumptions and the prioris. Even the words we speak and write are conditioned by various historical changes in the semantic meaning, subtle changes that may reverberate in the final words we use. A primary epistemological question is whether they are facts dependent from the perceptual and the observational distortions. Is objective knowledge available? Is it possible for man to overcome distortion in the perception and interpretation of facts? Science is not only the gathering of facts, but seeing facts in a new way, a new order. Modern perception theory states that every perception is distorted by the preconditioned anticipation, that is, we particularly see what we expect or want to see. We do not perceive directly. A perception is the result of cluster of stimuli to our senses. By trial and error, we try to verify reality and arrive at the most probable impression, but our actual perception is conditioned by the former impression and perceptions, the memories of which are not consciously available to our minds. Every perception implies cognitive presumptions, that is, the priori assumptions about the existence of reality, rooted in infertile experiences about reality. This mutual interpretation between prejudiced suppositions and perceptions is a dilemma we never completely overcome. In observing reality, man always stands in his own way. Even in physics, there is an interaction between the observer and what is observed. We have to accept the limitation of thinking that tries to understand thinking. According to Gödel's theorem, quoted by Bridgman, no logical systems can ever prove that itself as a perfect system in the sense that it may not contain concealed self-contradictions. Even the words postulate, axiom, and priori outwittingly bind our thoughts to the presumptions, to the context of the beginning, even though the astronomers prefer to talk about continuous creation, a flow of events without beginning and end. Non-postulate or self-evident proposition is an isolated truth. It is always related to other facts or other systems. It is merely true in relation to something else. We may distinguish between epistemological monism and pluralism. Monism pretends that there is perceived or are remembered in the sole object of knowledge. While data may exist independently for the perceiving and knowing mind, the mind shapes the data. The creative part of us shapes the world. Pluralism supposes that the set of different operations of the mind is active in leading to common goal of increased knowledge. According to modern mathematics, the amount of possible assumption is infinite. In all meaningless nonsense, Rules of regularity can be demonstrated, which sometimes may lead to the discovery of meaningful truths. Practically speaking, pluralism uses the aforementioned Hacker logic approach. Derived from Hacker's H. Following Spinoza's on a dimensious extinction idea, it tries to delineate the knowable from the unknowable, alternatively unknowable. Pluralism tries to integrate both the rational deductive and the empirical approaches to what is knowable, without denying the probabilistic, technological, and genetic approaches that are also possible. In pluralism, we distinguish various object and subject approaches to the problem of gathering knowledge, approaches which are unwittingly used to every student. What we, for instance, can detect in some rigid adheres to the determinism in the researcher's expectation to find fixed relationships, by which he means a reduction of diversity into identical phenomena. The need for causality is our need for prediction. For recognition of systems in the future. Psychologically, we find, for instance, a relationship between a rigid belief in determinism and compulsive character development, especially in people who have no epistemological training. The theory of infinite ideas. This theory presupposes an independent intrinsic primary assumption, and a priori, an innate idea, however inductive and experimental the student may try to be. In its ultimate form, this theory is espoused by the mystic, who think that the knowledge can only be acquired by faith. The intuitions also think that the truth can only be experienced directly. The same approaches perceived Oriental thinking, and it is true that many contemporary physicists speak about intuitive hunches that lead them to new facts. Psychological theories involving our perceiving the outside world in accordance with the interior gastras also make use of the comparable theory of innate ideas. Methodical use of the unique and the special gastras is made use of its so-called analogy method. So often used in existential psychiatry, the special gastro is compared with other special phenomena. The clinical observer tries to arrive at a new clear insight into the disease. The Westschau, for him, the single case history is just as important as many. The clinical observer tries to arrive at a new clear insights into the disease. For him, the disease case history is just as important as the many. The same method of approach is used by linguistics when they search for the roots of man communication and expression. The word love, for instance, is derived from the old Sanskrit root lab, meaning the offer of the firstborn child to the tribal god, something of which archaic, cruel, and sacrificial meaning of the word reverberates in our modern croning about love. Ideas are changed into human emotions. Sometimes the original idea is a mere protest against the status quo, sometimes a variable expansion of our thinking. We can become the slave of our own ideas and rationalization, for there exists a totalitarianism of the idea, and there exists a tyranny of the instincts. The idea and the consequent ideological dogmatism can become an independent, reigning entity. Psychology has demonstrated that people possessed by strange and verified ideas are often reenacting repressed early introjects, such as isolated constructs related to infertile magical thinking. Such mental encapsulation are still used to torture people who cannot conform or accept dictatorship or theories and ideas. Such mental encapsulation are still used to torture people who cannot conform and accept the dictatorship of theories and ideas. The rack and the burning pyre have been part of the human way of converting and convincing those with different ideas. Inquisitional and ideological persuasion still exist. Man's rigid adherence to ideologies means that concepts arrived at a postulation or made up of mutual contract can be just as vigorously dogmatic and tyrannical as concepts acquired by sensory verification. The theory of innate ideas teaches us, paradoxically, that the veracity of reality is also a human construct subject to research. the theory of relative prioris. Experience may change the priori, either by denial of the axiom or correlated experience. Every priori is only tentative basis for, and itself part of, a greater thought construct. Better induction and deduction push the priori back constantly to the receding frontiers of the unknown. But an intrinsic relation between the priori 1 and 2 remains. Epistemic theory is an enlargement of the Newtonian physics. Truth is found by testing and retesting the facts and concept. The hazards of human judgment lies in the pretending to recognize like and unlike without leaving room for the doubt that leads to verification. The emphasis in clinical pragmatism is on things to be done. First, there is the fact gathering, then the fact relating, and finally the condensation of many events into a concept that has to be continually retested. Knowledge is looked as an instrument of adjustment. Ideas and knowledge are operational tools for activity. They take part in reality and change it and are not mere specters. It is not the concept that is important, but its logical and practical consequences. Truth is verifiability, but who verifies, and with what superposition does he verify? Truth is verifiability, but who verifies, and with what superposition does he verify? Pragmatism can be compared with the old Hippocratic clinical method. The practitioner, the educator, or the therapist has to work with an incomplete science in which induction and deduction interact, and they must be in continual awareness of limitation of action and verification. Inquiry is detached experimentation. Clinical pragmatism is an account of operation and the results. Such operationalism must find a compromise between objectivism and subjectivism. If the acquisition were mere object data in the aim, no final explanation will be found, and in too much compulsion to explain, objectivity will be betrayed. Will the concept work? Sometimes the wrong theory can give the right cure and vice versa. This can only incite the clinician to enlarge his hypotheses and concepts. Causality and the approach to the realm of the indeterminate. What we call causality is closely related to the prediction of the future occurrences as tested and verified in the experimental situations. Causality is determination. Even though we in the universe may only speak of the laws of statistic probability, in the magnitudes of physical and chemical events in the body, laws of causal predeterminations are varied. However, this is not true for man as a whole and his personality. Here we see steering and triggering mechanism actively directed toward unknown goals. Microphysical action, for instance, the subatomic particles, are able to change genes and consequently later life patterns. These transmutations and changes of direction fall in the realm of indeterminate, according to Hensberg's principle of uncertainty. There exists a basic particle-wave dualism in physics comparable with the form-function dualism in behavior science. Particle and mass is a quantitative concept, wave a qualitative concept, a moving disturbance in the midst of regularities. Quality is always an interference, physical structure and the results of observation. Particle and mass is a quantitative concept, wave a qualitative concept, a moving disturbance in the midst of regularities. Quality is always an interference, physical structure the result of observation, derived from implied inferences. According to Niels Bohr, organic life, with its qualitative goal-directed aspect, is limited by being observed and judged when the events under the observation exist inside the realm of the atomic physics and the statistical probabilities determining these changes. There exists an innate interdependency not due to the inadequacy of existing knowledge, but related to the fact that every observer making observation and evaluations stands in his own way when he judges special microphysics dimension and subtleties. Under micro circumstances, the experiment encroaches too much on the subject under study. The right used for observation changes the particle to be observed. Prediction depends on dimensions. Certainty comes with a massive body. That is true for physics, but also true for psychology. The various goals and tendencies active in a person, some overt, some hidden, or some repressed, make for indeterminate prediction of his actions. The inference from experience is not experience in itself. It is a priori an implied deduction from the facts. The problem of unconscious determination of motivation in man connotes at the same time a certain freedom from determinacy. A subtle choice is possible among various patterns of action in the service of different genetically determined goals. Genetically determined has not the same meaning as casually determined. In the genetic motivation there is intention, aim, and goal, and some freedom of choice. What we call cathexis is the riddle of emotional involvement and investment, and it is not casually determined by merely motivated. Motivation is related to adaptational vacillations and is revealed by the study of ambivalence. The need for causality must be distinguished as a need to strip away inferences and observational prejudices, and the pediatric human habit of explanation mania, the latter being a derive of the infantile thoughts of omnipotence used as a defense against fear of the unknown. Our need for casual, comprehensible orderliness is in conflict with our intentional thinking. Causality, strictly taken, is in conflict with the immediate of the historical event. The psychological problem of freedom and determinacy acquired many new aspects with the clinical discovery that many a young person acts out with his parents unconsciously want to do but represses in themselves. Every form of freedom is contaminated by both genetic determinant. Every form of freedom is contaminated by both the genetic determinant, a chain of dependence on genetic endowment, and a contagious determinant, encroachment and coercion by the environment. Reformulating the term freedom in psychiatric terms, we may say that it represents the ways in which our identity has an impact on our experience. Freedom is the risk of our own individuality. It is the indetermination in the potentialities we possess. It is the choice between what is done and what can be done. As Hudson says, freedom is causality in the making, the existential approach. Much of the existentialist thinking goes back to Kierkegaard's intentionalism, his belief that truth is rooted in passion and emotions, in fear and in devotion. There are also reminiscences of Tertullian's credo absurd. I believe even when it may sound absurd. In every man there is love for the obscure, because this brings him back to the infantile feelings of magic omnipotence. Existential psychiatry is rooted in the studies of Jaspers, Hendag, and Bismarck, and has found a host of professional followers. This approach tries to show that man, whether in health or sickness, invariably exhibits the characteristic mode of being in the world. In their semantic battle over the verb to be, these students do not always appreciate that to be and is have different meanings. Sometimes is expresses an identity, sometimes a location, sometimes a predicament. The word existence has various meanings. Originally, it had a dynamic connotations. This approach tries to show that man, whether in health or sickness, invariably exhibits a characteristic mode of being in the world. In their semantic battle over the verb to be, these students do not always appreciate that to be and is have different meanings. Sometimes is expresses an identity. For example, he is James Smith. Sometimes a location, he is home. Sometimes a predicament, he is mortal. The word existence has various meanings. Originally, it had a dynamic connotations. Existere, to emerge out of interaction, something emerges. Later it became a more static concept of ontologic being behind the veil of our perceptions, the judgment of our emotions, and the prejudices of our inner galtas. However, in opposition to this mystic ontologic object in the epistemologic object whose qualities can be verified and are subject to investigations, Heidegger views thinking as mere creative process, in which inner goals prevail over actual being. Sartre, on the other hand, emphasizes everybody's responsibility in thinking about things. This means that Sartre brings the psychiatric concept of mutual mental contagion and persuasion in, leading to a communal commitment of either error or right solutions. Sartre existentialism is full of suicidal themes inspired by the terror of France's defeat and the occupation. Man is reeled by great nausea, by shame and despair about himself. Man is driven by irrational drives. This philosopher compares man's self-consciousness with being at the edge of the abyss, studying Gidry confronted by the terror of life's void. The clinical interpretation of schools of psychiatry, which differ with the tenets of existentialism, is that usually those who are more aware of their suicidal tendencies experience the dizziness of the abyss, and that this is the direct encounter with their self-destructivity. Existentialists accept the fundamental data in psychiatry are the subjective experiences of the patient. Clinically, this may be either a direct sensory or the pneumatic experience, and both can be distorted by our limited means of communication. In their approach to psychiatry, existentialist students try to be phenomenologic and purely descriptive as far as possible, but every word we utter is already inference and verdict. No example can be neutral. They seek to be away from casual explanation, for which they reproach psychoanalytic psychotherapy as though a small description were not already tied up with the independent explanation and derivations. In their approach to psychiatry, existentialist students try to be pharmacological and purely descriptive as far as that is possible, but the word we utter is already an inference and verdict. No example can be neutral. They seek to get away from the casual explanation, for which they approach psychoanalytic psychotherapy as though mere description were not already tied up with the inadvertent explanation and derivations. Their continued attempt to look at man as entirety prohibits the detailed view which is so much needed for cure and therapy. While rejecting psychoanalytic views, the existential psychiatrists make use of the terms and concepts derived from the psychoanalytic insights. In the background of existential psychiatry, one often discerns a theological orientation that resists man's interpretation of that which is considered imminent and not capable of human explanation. For instance, an existential definition of delusion is that which cannot understand and cannot emphasize with. For instance, an existential definition of delusion is that which cannot be understood and cannot emphasize with. The danger here is that the theory is made up of our failures and limitations. Existential theories have inevitably given rise to the review of semantic and linguistic problems in psychiatry. A clear and detailed phenomenological description enhances empathy, intuition, and descriptive scrutiny, and descriptive acuity. Existential psychiatry emphasizes being moved by another human being. It reminds us that there is a continual dialogue being carried on between mind and the world, that there is a very subtle and detailed rapport between man and his fellow men. But a method of direct empathy and sympathy for one's fellow being can only become critical scientific significance when one is aware of all the pitfalls of transference and counter-transference, and of the non-critical inference and prejudices we use in the approaching our fellow man. Every man projects his own hidden feelings and prejudices into his fellow being. So do I, and so do the existentialists. The mystic approach to problems creates its own new problems. The search for the ecstatic view and the present inner illumination often bypasses the need for quiet verifications. True, scientists often have illuminated hunches, but they must subject these hunches verification and experiment. True, scientists often have illuminated hatches, but they must subject these hatches to verification and experiment. Reason has to verify their controllable intuition. The existentialist approach has taught us, however, how to interpret freedom. As noted before, freedom in psychiatric terms represents the way our awareness of identity, of being in the world, has an impact on our experience. Freedom may be called the individual uniqueness of our being in the world. Without belief and the acceptance of freedom, no psychotherapy could work. Without a belief in the acceptance of freedom, no psychotherapy could work. The phenomenological and the semantic approach. The goal in psychiatry phenomenology is to give a purely descriptive analysis of primitive subjective process. Yet this cannot be done independent of causal and genetic presumptions. Giving things names inevitably leads to order and method. Every description already has an intentional value. Something emotional is expressed about the thing, and a content value. The thing itself has the caught in words. The thing itself has to be caught in words. Pure description is made more difficult because of man's dual attitude toward the world. He described man as part of the world he observes, and in observing, he opposes the world. Man is in the world and stands opposite the world. The semantic sign is used to connote an object or experience as a result of manifold historical sequences, and they reverberate in the actual words we use. We always talk to each other with the history of mankind evolving our thoughts in us. Words have conscious meaning and unconscious appeal related to the various symbolic consideration expressed in that word throughout history. The relation between word symbols and the thing referred as conditioned by the history of the word, by the culture we belong to, and by the specific code scientific groups accept. Science itself may be defined as a habit of communication among those interested in the same facts. In science, the theory of language and communication plays its own specific role. It predicts for us about our verbal encounters with other people, much as physical theory does to technology. During recent years, the behavior sciences, psychiatry included, have been too much involved in often perplexing over specialized uses of the words, often employed in inconsistent ways and with greater emphasis sometimes given to the terminology than to the subject being investigated. Behavior science can easily become a conversationalist jargon. After all, words can be used either to hide or to express thoughts. Many neurotic patients not only use the atavistic language reminiscence of mother-child relationship, but employ the communication as a mask against the danger of discovery. Many people continually stick to forms of past conversations and cannot adapt to new verbal communion. The innate relation between verbalization and thinking causes language to shape our thoughts, and our thoughts to shape language. New words introduced into epistemology, operationalism, interdependency, time binders, force us to use the concept represented by the new word. Terminology can thwart originality of thinking. Usually we are not conscious of the verbal habits we have taken over from our parents and teachers and co-scientists, and we are unaware that we caught in their ways of thinking. In our thinking, we are language bound. We cannot talk to ourselves without verbalizing. This is why we confuse words with things. Words are not only time binders, but also thought binders. The verb to be, so frequently used in existentialism, presupposes identities which have crept in a result of thinking or being, and beings and not being as separate entities and not as part of the total process of growing and becoming. The Chinese language, for example, does not have this ambivalence and segmentation of expression, the acts of communication and our patterns of speech. Freud's investigation technique of free association and free verbalization throws a special light on special habits on what transpires behind normal conversation and communication. Because communication is the psychoanalytic setting in a Grotsky caricature of normal speech, the technique of free association informs us of the various functions included in speech and communication far exceeding linguistic experiences. The analytic situation has taught us how varied the means of communication that man uses: preverbal, gesture, sound, organ language, and finally his verbal patterns. Precise language is more often used to inhibit free rapport than to communicate. People only understand each other through the use of several types of communicative functions. The combination and integration of these functions helps to overcome the semantic limitation of the static word. The following summary represents the different aims of speech and verbal communication as observed in the daily world laboratory of psychoanalytic therapy. Verbal communication represent: 1. The need to express, to give vent to emotions and moods, and the need to signal. Such speech has the same biological signal function as that of animals. The word is a shout, a cry for help, a warning, a defiance, an infertile discharge of effect. The need to make sound, lust for noise, onomatopoeia. The word is escape from silence. Words and noises, word of anxiety. The word is pure motoric release. Sound can become a magical defense against the unknown. The word is mere play. For some people, speech is only an automatic function. Hearing something trigger off-learned mementos. It starts a release of old recordings without any emotional participation. 3. The need for contact. For human companionship, the desire to conform, to be cozy. The word bridges interhuman space. Talking and fantasizing are used in the service of giving and gaining attention. 4. The need to communicate. To inform, to state facts. The word becomes a semantic sign. This is particularly the rhetorical and the persuasive function of language. 5. The need to create, to formulate ideas, to produce. Speech is used as a trial, a transition act preceding the overt act. 6. The need to confront the world. The word becomes means of aggression or the beginning of scientific curiosity. Its illusion, hopes, white lies are produced, and the word can also become a means of separation from reality. 7. The need for individuation, self-assertion and awareness of existence, the need for distinctive, the need to distantiate from others and from one's own emotions. The words become a means of confronting reality. I want to give reality its own proper name. The need to control, as in the magic gestures of children and the primitive people, who name things in order to possess them magically. This magic function of the word is essentially expressed in compulsive behavior. The word has become the tool of magic strategy in service of omnipotence. The need to be controlled. Some people seek for submissiveness, dependency, or cause-imagine and equalization in the verbal contact. We all speak unwittingly in different idioms to different people, depending on their appeal, persuasive impact, and what they are consciously and unconsciously mean to us, and what they consciously or unconsciously mean to us. This is even true to the scientific jargon we use. 10. The need to control others. To be the center of attention, this strategy may be expressed verbally in attempts to evoke word or deed reaction in the listener. The need to induce this cooperation, direct command, assertion of opinion, withholding of words, reservation of opinion, direct magic strategy, naming of things and persons to reduce their mysteriousness and hence threatening aspects, verification, verbal strategy, cursing and excommunications. 11. Sexual desire. The word searches for the willing partner through the guiltless promiscuity of words. The word is flirtation, anticipation, a sexual tackle. The word serves 12. The word serves a camouflage and defense mechanism. It serves as a need to deceive, disguise, to utter falsehood, the need to conceal thought or the absence of thought, the need to confuse others. Being not understood often gives the feeling of magic power. Subtle mannerisms of communication have become part of distinguished character defenses. Word crunches and eulogiums are used as concealment. Talking is used to cover up guilt and shame. The need to indefinitely to express unconscious motives through slips of the tongue, stammering, lapses, mistake, tics, rituals, mistakes, rituals, witticisms, obscure terminology. Speech becomes a compulsive repetition of mumbo-jumbo in the service of frustrated drives. 14. The refusal of contact. The refusal of contact is often seen in psychotic negativism and neurotic inhibition of speech. End of chapter 6.